I was whisked away and gang raped until dawn. They soaked me in paraffin, struck a match 3 times and tried to light me up.
2 men held my legs apart. The 3rd man then cut me using a bayonet.
Because society constructs this woman as property, as something that is owned by her spouse, if the fighting forces or the belligerents hit out at this platform, this precious property, then they are actually achieving the ultimate aim.
Konsi, along with 2 sisters, were on their way to the village market when they were ambushed by a group of rebels.
A teenage boy was picked and ordered to slice off our lips, nostrils and earlobes. We were forced to eat up the pieces.
When we started documenting here in Uganda, we found out that very little had been done. During conflict, of course, there are so many atrocities that are committed, both to men and women. But as for women, they suffer both, whereby other than getting the physical abuses, they are targeted sexually. And these sexual violences, which includes gang rape, sexual slavery, name it, they bring sexual and reproductive complications onto women.
My husband had been killed and my co-wife abducted. A couple of days later, the same men returned and demanded for one of the 3-year-old children, saying that the mother had asked for the child. They harassed and abused me sexually. I continued suffering with the remaining children, using dry banana leaves for a blanket.
Maria's pains are a lifetime's. She conceived from one of the cattle rustlers' gang rape and carried the baby to term. It is, however, another bout of gang rape that Maria lives to remember.
3 weeks after the ordeal, I started bleeding heavily. I developed sores around my vagina and rashes in the anus. I visited a native doctor who gave me some herbs. The bleeding stopped, but the sores remained fresh and the itching was intolerable. After a month, the sores cured, but returned only 3 weeks later. For a while, my condition improved. It was then that I realized I was pregnant. This pregnancy was a nightmare. The womb was abnormally big, and many people thought I would give birth to twins. My condition worsened. I had to be hospitalized. At delivery, 2 basins of yellowish substance were drained from my body. The baby, too, was yellow in color, and half of her head was abnormally spongy. She was so tiny. She died 7 days later.
Some of them suffered from injuries to their birth canals, injuries to their bladders, which are still going on. And as a result of being exposed to rape and indiscriminate sexually transmitted diseases are common.
They soaked me in paraffin, struck a match 3 times and tried to light me up. I wailed and cried as I struggled to put out the fire. The pain in my head has never stopped. I'm always experiencing a burning effect, especially in my stiff neck, and I sweat all the time.
We hear about so many male heroes, but we have never heard about the women silent sufferers. And of course, this has continued affecting women to an extent that they have lost their self-esteem.
In times of armed conflict, the women were found to have participated in various forms of activities, most of which were against their will. Forced marriage, sexually enslaved, forced labor. Viola was picked by a government soldier who decided to take her for a wife.
I was with my husband in the nearby village during the war. The soldiers grabbed me and took me to the barracks. One of the soldiers took me for a wife. He later took me to his village, where a traditional marriage was performed, and for 4 years I lived with his mother. In the 5th year, there was a change of government. I escaped in the confusion of the takeover. I am happy that my husband took me back.
Grace was fetching water at a borehole near her home when she was struck by a landmine. She is now confined to a wheelchair and was abandoned by her husband. But following counseling by a local NGO, People's Voice for Peace, Grace is picking up pieces of her life and moving on.
Somebody has been traumatized for a long time, develops an attitude change. They may never be trustful again. They may never want to believe again. This change in themselves could manifest in all kinds of various ways. And usually somebody will say from war combat or from a traumatic situation, you always hear relatives say, so-and-so changed since that time.
Rosaline is a victim of a landmine blast that was set up by rebels one fateful night when they were mourning the loss of a sister. Today, Rosaline lives with constant seizure attacks.
The seizures came from shrapnels that came from a landmine that embedded themselves in her brain, and they could not be extracted out or operated out. They'll have to be there for as long as she lives. Alum has had help. Her eye has been fixed. She has been given glasses. Her seizures, the epileptic fits, were controlled with medications.
ISIS Wiki realized that women in these areas that have been devastated by war conflict suffer a lot of medical problems. So to address these medical problems, as they were undertaking the documentation of the women experiences, they also had short-term medical interventions.
The involvement of Medica Mondiale therefore enabled the assembling of a medical team of psychiatrists, gynecologists and surgeons from Gulu, Butabika, Mulago and Kitgum hospitals in Uganda. The team was charged with addressing some of the reproductive health conditions of women.
You have got people whose injuries are not properly managed. They may heal with the complications. There may be surgical illnesses that need surgical attention. They may be staying with them in the camps, so they become big. For example, some of the hydrocele that we have worked on have become big. Some of the hernias we have worked on are big. And we have got recurrent hernias, probably because they were not properly operated. We have worked on thyroids, big thyroids. We have got children that have got burns. They had burns and has got severe contractures of the fingers, contractions around the neck. And we have been able to help these people to release these contractures. And many other gynecological conditions have also been worked on.
The magnitude of the problem is so big. What we did was really a tip of the iceberg.
It is my appeal to all other stakeholders to at least try to solicit funds now to reach out as many women, children and men as possible. If we don't do this and we leave these women and men with the health complications they are having. I've not even talked about the level of trauma that we've found these people to have. It will be useless for us to think that we are going to be able to achieve our Millennium Development Goals.